So we're pail feeding our hives, which are on the edge of the apiary, maybe closer to our neighbors. We pail feed to these yards to make sure we don't interfere with any work they're doing, and so we don't feed their hives. So we basically just fill the pails up, and we invert the pail over top of the hive, and what happens is the syrup drains out through the screen. As you can see, there's a little bit of syrup spilt there because it's drained out through the screen until it forms a suction on that screen, and the bees will leave the hive through that hole, the hive top hole, access the syrup, and then they will suck the syrup down in the pail and then store it below. It's a very efficient way to feed a lot of syrup to the hives at once. So another way I'm feeding my apiary in the yards that aren't close to neighbors, what I do is I set out these open feeders, and I set the feeders out close to the yard, not too close, but conveniently. And what I do is, if my yard is counting 40 hives, like I typically set my yards out in, I set out a tote for every 10 hives, and I fill these totes up with syrup, and I let them rob feed out of these totes. And basically the reason why I want to set out one tote for every 10 hives is just to help spread out the surface area of the feed for the bees to feed on. And this just helps eliminate some of the fighting that goes on. Let's take a peek inside to see. These guys have pretty much drained this in a matter of a day. And what happens, I have wood floats down here, and I have a bit of straw around the outside. And what happens is the bees come in to feed on the syrup, and they get pretty excited, and they start, pushing, and they start fighting. And as they push and they fight, they actually push each other into the syrup. And as that bee starts to drown, it grabs onto the bee above them and pulls that other bee down into the syrup. So they, just like a human drowning, bees will do exactly the same thing. So we want to make sure that we have enough surface area for these bees to feed on, so they're not fighting and pushing as much. And we want to make sure we have enough wood floats, and I use oat straw because it seems to hold on top of the syrup a lot better. Just something for these bees to grab a hold of and pull themselves out if they have to.